Conor McGregor back in the news cycle after the Anthony Joshua and Daniel Dubois fight. He was there at the fight, made some comments to the media, to Ariel, and a couple of other fellas. Well, Dan Hooker is out here campaigning for a fight following all this news coming out of Conor McGregor. Shout out to Cage Side Press for this post. Dan Hooker makes his case for a fight with Conor McGregor during an appearance on Submission Radio. This interview comes courtesy of Submission Radio. This is what Dan Hooker had to say about the Conor McGregor debacle. He's without a fight right now. I know Conor's hungry to fight and fight someone that he can get something from and makes a lot of sense. What does he get out of beating Chandler? He knocks out Michael Chandler in the first round. Conor McGregor doesn't even get in the top 5 off of that performance. Dan Hooker, of course, fought Michael Chandler back in January of 2021, all the way back in 2021. Michael Chandler, that was his first fight in the UFC, sparked out Dan Hooker easily within the first 2 minutes of the fight. Dan Hooker's trying to throw some shade Michael Chandler's way, not a big fan of Chandler at all, but here he is campaigning for the Conor fight, and honestly, I think that would be a fun fight. Conor McGregor was supposed to be fighting Michael Chandler for about the last 2 years or so. It was going to be Michael Chandler. Chandler is now facing Charles Oliveira at UFC 309 on the undercard of the John Jones and Stipe Miocic fight. Conor McGregor says that he's looking for a fight. He's been campaigning for a fight. He's been drug tested a ton of times in 2024. He's the most drug tested athlete in 2024, as a matter of fact. And he's looking to come back as soon as possible. He wanted to come back in December. He wanted to come back in November. He wanted to come back at the end of 2024 at some point. Last half of 2024. Well, now it looks like it's going to be 2025. Dan Hooker is campaigning for that fight. I think that would be a fun fight. Dan Hooker's going to keep that fight standing just like Conor McGregor does. Dan Hooker's not quite as fast as Conor McGregor. That's true. Dan Hooker has a top 5 ranking. That is true. Dan Hooker is a tough opponent. That is not what Conor McGregor is looking for. Conor McGregor, if you remember when he came back in 2020 after a long layoff, he took on a Donald Cowboy Cerrone who was aging at the time and finished him within 45 seconds, just absolutely dominated the fight. Some people thought the fight was thrown. Dan Hooker, obviously not the kind of guy that would throw a fight, not the kind of guy that would go in there and sacrifice his dignity to allow Conor McGregor to get an easy win. That's just not what Dan Hooker's going to do. So what do you guys think? Do you want to see Dan Hooker fight Conor McGregor instead of a Michael Chandler? We know that Michael Chandler was talking about, and even Conor was talking about at the fights, at the boxing event at Wembley Stadium, that he wanted to take on Chandler still, and that after Chandler beats or loses to Charles, that he would still fight him. It seems like that's what's going on. I think Conor knows that Chandler is a big American star, and if they come over to America to do that fight's going to sell pretty well on pay-per-view. We all know that all Conor fights are going to sell well on pay-per-view, but Michael Chandler, is a big enough star for the UFC in America to sell that fight and make that fight what it should be in terms of a Conor McGregor comeback. It's probably the biggest fight in terms of popularity that you could put on. Dan Hooker, though, that would be a fun fight. I'll give him that. That would be very, very fun. So let me know what you guys think. Do you want to see Dan Hooker fight Conor McGregor? Do you want to see Michael Chandler fight Conor McGregor? Or do you have a completely other idea in general? Who do you want to see fight Conor McGregor? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.